And here we go. Hey, good evening, everybody, and welcome to the Innovate HPE MOOC this year. This is episode 3, and we're excited that you're with us tonight. So far this season, we have 2 episodes under our belt with Joe Sanfilippo and Jimmy Cassis in episode 1, and Executive Director of the Cumberland Valley High School, Mark Blanchard, in episode 2. That was an interesting conversation because Executive Director is one of those jobs that prior to this year didn't exist, and we always talk about kids going out into the real world and getting jobs that they don't yet exist. As I've mentioned in previous episodes, we're building this whole season around our 2018 keynote speakers book, Hacking Leadership. It's written by Joe Sanfilippo and Tony Sinanis. Tony is going to be with us in a recorded version toward the end of the season, and Joe has already been with us, and it's been a fabulous episode. We have some rock star administrators joining us this season, and we're learning so much about how to build culture in schools. And again, if you haven't seen previous episodes, we're approaching leadership kind of like everyone is a leader. If you're a superintendent, you lead administrators and principals. If you're a principal, you lead teachers. If you're a teacher, you lead students, and on down. And so leadership is really leadership, and we have some great leaders with us on this season. Tonight is no different. Tonight we're going to talk about culture and building culture and kind of a contrasting vibe. And we have 2 amazing principals who work in 2 different school districts from Northeastern High School. Our high school principal tonight talking about culture is Matthew Gay. And from Winding Creek Elementary School, yet to be opened in the Cumberland Valley School District, Mr. Chad Runkle. So I'll give each of them a chance to introduce themselves and talk about how they went from the classroom to the principal's chair. And we'll start with Matt. So Matt, if you could just give us a little update on how you got where you were.
Sure, Todd. Thank you. I started out as an English teacher in Frederick, Maryland. I did that for 3 years. And then I had the opportunity to come to Pennsylvania, to Cumberland Valley, where Todd is. And I taught at Cumberland Valley for, I think about 7 years, 6, 7 years before I became an administrator. I kind of went to administration honestly, for a couple reasons. I wanted to find a job that I liked in education that I thought was more long-term ability to do. The grading in being an English teacher, I thought, I don't think this is going to be sustainable for me to do the type of job I want to do and keep up. But I wanted to stay in schools, and I wanted to find a job that maybe used my skills a little differently. So I tried administration, and I liked it. I'd also been very involved with the association and union stuff and, negotiating contracts and stuff. And I really liked that part of it, kind of the leadership part of it. So became an assistant principal at CV, did that for 3 years, and then had the opportunity to become the head principal here, the high school principal at Northeastern School District in York County. And I've been here for 10 years. And in between, amongst all that, I was an alternative ed teacher at CV. I was an alternative ed principal. I've also been an adult educator, and I taught migrant education for about 10 years in the summers. So that's kind of my background.
Thanks, Matt. And Chad, if you could introduce yourself, and then I'll introduce our host for tonight as well. Chad, go ahead.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Todd. So I'm Chad Runkle. I currently am in the process of working with Cumberland Valley. We are going to be opening a school next school year. So that'd be Winding Creek Elementary. My time in education really began pretty much in Cumberland Valley and has stayed throughout most of my time here. So I did my student teaching in Cumberland Valley, had a short stint, 1 contract year in Shippensburg, and then came back to teach 4th and 5th grade in Cumberland Valley, most of that time in 5th. So about 9 years in the classroom, and then got the opportunity to jump into administration. And really my kind of passion for administration started, I didn't really think I was going to be a principal when I was actually going for my administrative certificate. I didn't think I would ever really use it, to be honest with you. But as I was getting it, I started to feel as much interest in what was happening in the 2 classrooms of my team as I did what was happening in mine. And there were some amazing Friday evening and Thursday evening conversations with those 2 teachers that really made me feel like, wow, talking to teachers and being involved in what's happening in other people's classroom, really, I don't know, I caught the bug for that and really wanted to work with teachers. So ended up going to one of our schools in Cumberland Valley. I was a principal at Greenridge Elementary for 5 years. I then was transferred over to Hampton for 2, then to Sporting Hill for 1. All of that kind of seems like jumping around, but really it's all been kind of lining up to this place of opening Winding Creek, which all 3 of those schools that I previously were will have students and teachers coming from there to form Winding Creek. So it's kind of a jumping around moment, but it's led to a pretty cool opportunity that'll start next school year.
Well, thanks, Chad, and we look forward to talking to you a little bit about that process of opening that school. As you know, folks, we've been hosting all year with Jessica Piccone-Cook, our executive director from Pennsylvania AFERD, and our administrator guest host this season is doing an amazing job in bringing an administrator perspective to our MOOC this year, and he's going to take off and start off the night tonight. I'd like to introduce you to Brian Robinson. He's an assistant principal at the Cumberland Valley High School, and he's going to start off tonight. Go ahead, Brian. Brian, you need to unmute.
That was such a rookie move. Thankfully, this is not live, and we can edit that out.
Human side of this whole thing.
What I was going to say after that glowing introduction was, if I sit in a corner and not talk, I'm doing a good job giving the administrator's perspective, then I'm having a great season, everybody. All right. Well, in Hacking Leadership, Joe and Tony talk a lot about students. That's why we're in schools. And student choice and student voice are featured really prominently in the text. So student choice has been a hot topic in education for the last few years. As building leaders, Matt and Chad, how do you guys encourage staff to incorporate student choice in their classrooms?
You want to jump in, Matt, or you want me to go?
You go, Chad.
All right. So I think from a choice perspective, this really has to do with what do we really believe about the process of learning. And I think when you think about learning and you take away all the red tape and all the things that are kind of forcing our way in education right now, and you really break down to what learning should really look like, you think of, something that's kind of the pendulum swinging back right now, which is like the 4 C's. You think of collaboration and communication. You think about kids having ability to be creative and all of those things. And anytime you're encouraging staff to walk down those roads, I think it has to do with live, real conversations through what's happening and what you're seeing in classrooms. I think a huge part of what we're going to talk about tonight and culture and climate and all of those things have to do with being in classrooms and being able to have real conversations about what you're seeing. So if you're going to take a lens of trying to encourage student choice, then the very best way to do that is through seeing something within a lesson and then being able to follow up informally with ideas of this is what this would really look like in your classroom to give students a choice. Because most of the time when you're working through an idea in education, you're like, well, yeah, that sounds great from a philosophical point of view, but what does that look like in my classroom at 1 o'clock in the afternoon on a Tuesday? And so you have to be able to jump in with those ideas and kind of walk the path with people.
Chad, that sounds pretty good. And that I would agree with that being part of it. Having credibility as an instructor is really helpful so that folks will listen to you and that your ideas make sense. I was looking at it from a different perspective. And really, I was thinking it starts with modeling, giving learners choice, whether that's giving students choice from my point of view, like in my role. So engaging, taking surveys to find out what kids actually prefer, providing choice in what they do, giving voice to student concerns, recognizing that these are living, breathing people capable of cognizant thought. And sometimes I have to remind people of that they have rights and they have beliefs and they have values, and we should honor that and help them develop those. That's part of our role here. So giving kids voice and choice in my role, and also modeling that same with staff, where I can, let folks choose what they do, whether it's committee assignments, whether it's the way to tackle a problem, whether it's just pulling together a team of kind of expert teachers or just folks who, can lend an ear as you process through something, getting some feedback from them. All of that kind of models that idea of treating kids like thoughtful consumers and giving them voice and choice. But I like what Chad was saying, because when you're in the classroom, taking advantage of those opportunities and then having the credibility where that folks listen to you. I just had a conversation today with a math teacher, and I'm an English teacher, but what I was saying was very effective teaching, but I'm hoping I can get this teacher to start moving beyond algorithmic modeling. Here are the steps of a problem, and getting the kids to start asking why, or the teacher asks those kids why. And so they're thoughtful about the process, not simply remembering steps in an algorithm. But I have some level of credibility. I've worked hard to have some credibility as an instructor, and that allows that to happen.
Matt, you just kind of led into our next question. Before I get into that, though, if anyone has questions or comments tonight and wants to weigh in, please feel free to do so on the comment section of the video and also on Twitter. We're using the hashtag HackLead this time. So, Matt, I'm going to start with you. In your building, what are some examples of student voice that you see actually live and happening in the classrooms? Do you have teachers that are kind of rolling that out and living it day to day?
We do, and as a school, I think maybe we're kind of all in this. I'm in a high school, so we definitely just saw this. We had the March 18th events, so the student walkouts from March 18th, and I had some kids starting, some leaders early on talking about it. They engaged a teacher. The teacher said, "Listen, I think it would be good for you to engage the administrators. Go see Mr. Gay." They came down, they saw me, and over the course of 2 weeks, I kind of helped them get some folks together who, some students, and kind of showed them how to lead, how to be thoughtful in terms of communicating their message, or how to, do some event planning, that sort of thing. It was their voice. I just would say things like, "Have you thought about having this kid involved? He has a pretty popular Twitter feed that everyone follows because he's in charge of our student section." And, those little things help. And we engaged the kids and made sure they had voice. We made sure the people who did not want to participate and had a different position also had voice, and they exercised their right not to participate. And it really was well done. The whole event was featured on a Facebook live stream from our local paper, York Daily Record. And we only received compliments. And as we got them, all I kept saying is, the kids did this. The kids did this. We gave them voice. And I really think that's important as a school. And as you model it, your teachers start to buy in. They start to recognize, these kids are thoughtful consumers of what we're doing. They have ideas and beliefs and values that we should honor. We should help them develop. So I've tried hard to model that in how I act with kids and how I talk to kids and how I treat them. So kind of on the big scale, that's where I think the most recent example of voice comes out.
Well, it's when I think about not being in the classroom anymore, that's the thing that I miss the most, is getting to deal with the future that's going to change the world on a daily basis, because kids have so much potential to do whatever it is that they want to do. And I think we're so fortunate to work with the students that we do and see them at those beginning stages and watch them foster and grow into the young adults and the world changers that they're going to be. So
Jess, there's a lot of people, though, it makes them nervous.
Mm-hmm.
Right? There's a lot of folks that are nervous to hand over power and authority to young people, but they're never going to learn unless we do. And we can do it in a safe way. We can kind of, make sure there's a net underneath or training wheels on as they kind of take their little wobbly baby giraffe steps, trying to do these kind of cool things. So it's really changing mindsets, so people see young people, and high school kids certainly, as competent.
Before, Chad, I jump over to you. Matt, what do you think the biggest takeaway that the students left with that experience, the biggest learning experience?
Yeah, there was a few. One was how to express themselves in a way that fostered support, wasn't that alienating. They were thoughtful. We helped guide them into a thoughtful presentation. They learned certainly something about event management. And I think they learn how to navigate a bureaucracy, because we are a bureaucracy, and they figured that piece out. And they learn, like, listen, don't be afraid to share, even talk to me about it. And I think that was really useful for them, just in terms of self-advocacy.
Awesome.
Awesome.
Chad, what do you see, kind of on a daily basis within your schools where students have a voice in what they're doing?
Well, before I jump to that, just even adding to what Matt was saying, and I guess it ties even to what we're doing at the elementary level, because really this is all a continuum, right? And so you are looking at students going from having to sit in a row and raise their hand to ask to go to the bathroom, and then they leave to school the next day, they're in college, and they have complete, full kind of control of their lives, right? And yet we don't really functionally support that as a process all the way up through. And to Matt's point, you have to model that. There has to be that gradual release of responsibility. And that even starts at the elementary level of giving students that model of, this is what it looks like. And when you make that point, young man or young lady, then what about this idea? And talking to them as, real people. And sometimes everyone looks, especially at the elementary, you look and you see first graders and second graders, and you want to go ooja booja booja, like they're cute little things, but these are little people capable of really in-depth critical thinking. They come up with some amazing, fascinating points. We've had kids come to meet with the superintendent, and they drafted their own questions. They had their own ideas, and let me tell you, he was on call. Like he got asked some really good questions about what learning would look like for them in the future. And so I think, again, you need to make classrooms a place in which it's not just ask me a question, I give an answer, but it's really supposed to lead up to real life. And we don't sit and take multiple choice tests in our jobs. We collaborate with other people, and we need to have an opinion, and we need to know when to change our opinion or feel more informed. And that doesn't just happen. That has to happen. That's what education needs to look like. So I think that's where voice comes in the classroom, is we need to set up those opportunities so that you're not just sitting and listening to someone talk all day, but your experience of learning is really around the idea of informing and building, my own thinking, my own knowledge through that social constructivist lens of, these other people do inform my opinion, and I need to know when to listen to them and when to push back. But if you never get a chance to do that, how are you supposed to build that capability? And that starts in first grade.
Well, Chad, I love that word, social constructivist, because really I see that as the future of the world. I mean, that's the world that these kids are going into. The age of social media is in fact social, and they are more connected than any of us were as we grew up. So thank you for that term. And if we ask students in your school, we'll start with you, Chad, and then we'll move to you, Matt. If we ask students in your school, real or even imagined, since your school's not open yet, whether they had a voice, what would they say? Like, what would the kids say to you if you asked them if they had a voice?
Honestly, I really feel like we're a ways away from where we want to be. I think most kids, if they were being honest in a real situation, would say that on the day-to-day basis, they don't have the voice that they would like to have. I think that's the real answer. If most people are being really honest, I think there are moments and lessons and opportunities in which we establish voice, but it is not an everyday part of their learning and their school experience like it should be. So, certainly looking at building a new school and talking about what we want it to be and being able to build a vision in a way I've never had the opportunity to do before, because there's a certain level of excitement around a brand new school with brand new people, that people are open to ideas that maybe in a established culture they would not necessarily be as easy to do. We're really excited to give kids a voice and have a leadership as a central theme for our kids going into next year.
Mm-hmm. Well, Chad, before we move over to Matt with that, I mean, it's interesting that you brought that up. Chad's in a unique position, for those of you that don't know, where he is actually getting to sit out a year where he's supervising teachers and supervising students, and he's actually creating a school that isn't open yet. He's working towards a school that isn't open yet. Chad, when that was first presented to you, like, were you excited? Were you scared? Was it all of that? Was it like, oh my gosh? Because that seems like a unique opportunity to really create a vision from the ground up that probably, Matt, you didn't even get to have when you went to Northeastern, you had a culture that was established, and you had to kind of shift it to you. So, Chad, if you could talk about that, and then Matt, what would you do if you? I'll throw it over to you. What would you do if you had that opportunity?
Yeah, having been in 3 different schools prior to this one, certainly all of those schools had different cultures and different climates within them. It is amazing having the opportunity to have, had the path that I have had so far, to spend years in different schools and get a sense of how that structure happens. But to your original question, both. I'm like excited beyond belief, and every day is terrifying from the standpoint of both the things that need to be done, but really the raw responsibility that comes with it. I mean, we are building something very unique, and there is a buzz about it, at least for the people that are going that I've talked to. So you kind of, I keep saying, you get one shot at this. Like, if you really do it right, you can catch lightning in a bottle. If you get your stars to align, you have an opportunity to do something special. And certainly, I have a group of people with me trying to do exactly that. So yeah, it's pretty awesome experience so far, and humbling.
So, Matt, if you had that opportunity I know you went to Northeastern and there was a culture already established because the school was in fact open when you came, but what would you do with an opportunity like that? We build a high school, we give you a year to create it. What would that be like for you?
Well, I can't really fathom it. Part of my skill set, what I like to do is good. I love the idea of going to a place where there is opportunity for improvement in culture, right? Like, I feel like if I had a card that said exactly what I could do well as an administrator, or what I want to do, I think I do it well, but it's what I like to do, is take an underperforming culture and shift it, right? To turn it into a culture of success, a culture of achievement. And so that idea is so foreign to me. I don't think of myself as ever being in that situation, but it starts with coming up with ideas about what you personally believe in, and start assembling a team that holds some of those core values to you, and making sure you have a few people who see the world differently than you do, because that's important to have contrasting voice. You don't want a room full of people who always agree with everything you say. So, but you want people who deeply care about kids, who are passionate about social justice. I mean, these are things that, for me, those are some key items there. And who, I'm in a high school, so I think of content area expertise. I want some educators. In high school, I'm saying that on purpose, because in high school, not everyone is an educator. Some people are content area experts. I would like there to be folks who do both, who understand kids and child growth and development and how brains work and that sort of thing. So it would be very exciting. We just last summer read Lencioni. I think I even have it sitting here. Lencioni's The Ideal Team Player, about building teams and how important it is to be cognizant of your culture when developing your team. And that's something on our end, even with our established culture, but it's a culture we're still establishing, that we've become really thoughtful. And we've actually changed some of our interview questions at the building level and at the district level to reflect that idea, and how important it is to make sure that people who are coming on board explicitly understand the culture that they're getting into, and determining if that's a fit.
Thanks, guys. I think culture is something that oftentimes is easy to forget in the day-to-day management, and Chad, in your case, in the literally physical construction of your school. But guys, what are some ways that you and your students and your staff tell your school's stories to spread that culture beyond just the buildings beyond the walls of your buildings?
Well, it's funny you say that it becomes secondary, because honestly, I feel like I'm obsessed with it. I really, and that has nothing to do with being on with you guys tonight talking about the topic. I do feel like, from a culture perspective, I'm pretty intentional about what I want my culture to be like, and I think you have to hold it on a list of priorities right there at the top, and you have to go after it if you're really going to create culture. And that means intentionally going out into both the school and the community to work on that message. So, and again, I'm not the first person or leader to kind of say this, and I don't remember where I first heard it, but if you don't tell your story, somebody else will fill in that gap for you. So you want to be out there building that narrative and building your brand and sharing the things that are happening within your school in the community so that people understand that. So, but again, I don't think it can ever be, I'm too busy with discipline or too busy with this or too busy with that in order to attack culture, because I think it's the reverse. If you take care of your culture, all of those other things fall into place, and you're actually making gains in those other areas because of a strong culture. You get people who are more passionate, who are more focused, and therefore education possibility increases, behavior decreases. I just think it's a really big deal.
Yeah, Chad, you're absolutely right. You said something interesting. You said if you get too busy doing discipline and stuff, then you're establishing culture, right? It's a culture where discipline is more important than the people in the building, right? And the learning of discipline, and all that other stuff. That's an important detail. I came at this from a unique situation, I guess. I came from the same school district as Chad did. And so I most of my career, like pretty foundational years of my career, were spent at CV, where there was one very explicit culture. I mean, the culture of the high school there was one way, and I went to a district and a high school that was so very different. It was demographically very different. It was academically very different, and it was culturally very different. And I came just seeing opportunity after opportunity, even far more than I knew when I started. When I took the job, I didn't realize how much opportunity there was there to change the culture, to help the culture evolve. And but to speak to Brian's question about the how that's at the forefront, how are you telling your story? We had to take some risks at the beginning. And I say my administrative team at the time, we really took some calculated risks to tell the story. And when we arrived, we worked with our central office and said, one way we're going to tell the story, we're going to tell the story to our staff, and we're going to create a common enemy. And that's going to be the central office. And I hope you're okay with this. We're going to get people to unite in, against the central office that hasn't always afforded us the same resource. And they said, yes, go for it. Then we had to attack what we thought was substandard academic expectations. And we labeled it. This was a big risk. We labeled the culture of the school. We publicly in the building labeled it a culture of mediocrity. I think we started with a culture of failure. Then we moved up to a culture of mediocrity. And we told staff that's what we were finding. It was a risk, but we wanted to be honest, and we wanted to motivate people. So we told our story internally, and then we very purposely began telling a story externally. And it's interesting, that story we told externally wasn't finalized when we were telling it. In many ways, we were telling the story of the place we wanted to get to. And we wanted to bring people on. We wanted them to buy into, we were sharing our vision. And we wanted people to buy into that vision, which was telling the story of where we wanted to get to. And now it's become such a thing, so present that I have other staff doing it for us, right? I have staff tweeting out, the amazing things that are going on in their class and are engaging through social media. I had a teacher last year. We were fortunate enough to be on the U.S. World News, that report, that list of top high schools in Pennsylvania. And we were the top in New York County, and he made posters that talked about kind of some of those achievements, whether it's the Washington Post most challenging schools list or that, made posters that greet people at the door or when they come into the building. We're doing a lot, and people are helping us now to tell the story of our school and tell the story of the school we are now and that we want to continue to be. So we'll continue to be forward thinking and, visionary, I guess is the way to say that. But that telling the story is super important. That branding, we're still working on some of that. And where we are, we've shifted our culture quite a bit so that parts of our community and maybe the greater York County, not everybody knows the shift that's happened, which makes telling the story more and more important, right? So we're educating people to the new Northeastern, which is a really, if you ask anybody down here, this district has evolved dramatically, both demographically, academically, how we participate with our extracurriculars. Like lots of things have shifted over the last 10 to 15 years. And it's really important for us to make sure we keep telling that story. I mean, heck, we change real estate values with these stories, right? This is a big deal. So these stories are pretty important to people.
Wow, that's great. That's awesome. Wow.
What I love about what Matt said there is you heard multiple themes run through what he said, and he ended with the product of that work. But it started with a very specific strategic plan. There was a sit down and a discussion about how they wanted to attack it, where they wanted to go, that vision piece. And I mean, I can't speak for everybody, but in many of my interactions with other administrators, whether that be in CV or through cohorts of different organizations, I don't necessarily always hear that people are really thoughtful about their culture. It seems to be they're focused on other things, and then they describe their culture as almost a secondary thought. And you have to over your entire time as the leader of a building stay focused on that. It's not your entry plan and then you move on and the culture is just whatever it is. And I feel like that's what happens in a lot of my conversations with other administrators. But not to Matt's point of this is the story we're going to tell. This is how we're going to go about it. We're taking calculated risks. This is what could happen, and we're willing to go all in and push the chips in the middle of the table. And I mean, that's scary stuff.
It could have fallen apart.
Yeah, it could have fallen apart. But when you know you're doing it for the right reasons, I think you can put your head on the pillow at night when that stuff happens.
Yeah, it worked out.
Yeah.
And the thing that I love that both of you are kind of echoing is that culture is not a destination. It's an evolution over time. And it's going to be different from year to year, from student class to student class. And as you have different teachers and employees coming into your school building. So you can't think of it as that, well, we've arrived. All right. Let's just start something new tomorrow.
And Jess, it has to be like explicit about, Chad, I think you said something about your values and some, you did early in what you were saying. I'm thinking of something as little as making sure people know that I find it abhorrent if there's a crossword in a classroom, right? There's no research. Crossword puzzles are useful and whatever. So it has gotten out, right? Like, and I have, 75 teachers, and it has gotten out. I've heard mentor teachers tell others when a young teacher might pull out a crossword, suggest it, and they say, no, we don't do that. And you don't want Matt to know that you use a crossword. Right? Good. It's getting out, right? People are understanding the expectations. We're not that school. We're not a school that we give kids crossword puzzles and put our feet up for a while. We're not doing that.
Are you the no crossword guy?
I'm the no all sorts of things, but right. I am not down with crosswords.
Hashtag no crosswords.
Right.
Dad, what is your, literally building a new school and a culture? What are some of the things that you are intentionally putting into place and making known with your, future teachers, communities, parents, and students?
Well, this is a loaded question because I feel like so much work has gone into this. So, I'll try to hit some broad brushstrokes here. So when we first announced staff, and that started almost a year and a half ago, we started naming staff that were going to go. I met with every staff member at Dunkin' Donuts for a cup of coffee, bought them a cup of coffee, and explained to them where I was going. Like these are the themes that are important to me. And I need you to get on the bus. Like, this is where I'm going. This is where my school's going. And I need you to know that going in. And so it started with little conversations that surrounded that to the formation of a vision committee. And certainly I've been part of vision committee before where, your ultimate goal is to write a flowery statement that's going to go on a wall somewhere. And that really wasn't what we were trying to accomplish. So we landed on looking into a Winding Creek window, what do you want to see? What do we want learning to look like? And we actually we put a Padlet out for parents to be able to participate in that activity of what do you want to see looking through our windows at Winding Creek, and went through really core values, things that then make a conversation. And I said this in our last staff meeting. When we lay out this vision and we lay out these core values, then you better hold on tight and be prepared for me to push back. Because if I walk in, to Matt's point, eerily similar, and I see a word search, I'm going to look at you and say, how is that furthering our vision? This is what we agreed upon. These were the ideas we said that we valued and what we were driving towards. Mm-hmm. And a word search does not do that. And so if you really lay out the plan and you really are after, painting that picture for people, then it goes down to the detail of actually having the conversation about the crossword or the word search. Because that's what holds the line that your vision is actually going to move forward. So so much work around vision has happened up to this point that it's hard to even put in words. It's where I spend a lot of my time.
Brian, you want to?
Well, I was just going to say that, Chad, since I'm married to one of the members of your new staff, I think that bringing that group of educators together in all different settings with all different goals and outcomes, and sometimes it's just to socialize. I think it is a great thing that you've really committed to, and that your staff seems to be buying into.
Yeah, I do feel like it's been successful up to this point. Again, there is just a general buzz of getting to be part of something new and different that lends itself to an opening up of ideas. It just seems natural that you would talk about how something's going to be different if it's brand new and from the ground up. But to your point, yeah, even those things, my wife will sometimes give me a hard time about the social hours. And I was like, you don't understand, like that. This is actually really important right now. Because right now we're still at a place in which a lot of these people need a name tag in order to talk to each other. So in an elementary school, that's crazy town to have to, to not at least know the names of people that you're working beside. But that's our reality right now. And how can you sit and have a real conversation and push back on each other about what should happen in a third grade classroom if you haven't built any trust and sense of community and culture with each other in a human to human interaction? So yeah, I mean, and the core to all that is just calling a spade a spade. Let's call these things out. These are the challenges. And Matt even mentioned, standing in front of the staff and saying, right now we're a culture of mediocrity. Those aren't easy things to say, but when everyone knows it's true, there's not as much pushback as you might think sometimes. That's right. Where they go, yeah, and there are a group of people that passionately want you to say it and to do something about it, and those are the people you're running with.
Yeah.
I think I know the answer to this, and Matt, I'll start with you. But can you talk a little bit about how you do have the hard conversations with staff who just don't want to be a part, are happy with mediocrity and don't want to be a part of your vision?
Yeah, Brian. So here's the thing, right? You're having conversations with them, but in most cases, if you build the team, and Chad will probably really feel this, but we felt it too. If people act in a way that's unacceptable, the team, and when I say the team, I mean the staff, the faculty will marginalize that person, right? It becomes uncomfortable. No matter what I'm saying, right? What I say, just I'm not talking about professional actions I take, right? If we have to discipline or move to remove or something like that. I'm not talking about that. But if someone is engaged in behavior or whatever that's, if they're not on the bus and 90% of your school's on a bus and they think we're heading the right direction and this person is either an obstacle to it or it's just not buying into it or is not being forthright about values and beliefs and how we're going to help kids, the staff will marginalize them. So it'll become an uncomfortable place to work, right? Because no one wants to see the dream or the vision taken apart by somebody who's either lazy or doesn't share in the beliefs and the values. And remember, we're not talking about beliefs or values about Diet Coke versus Diet Pepsi. I mean, these are beliefs and values about kids and about how we are going to help them succeed in a world. And I'm in a district where there is a really strong sense of purpose and mission for helping kids who really, in many cases, don't come with many advantages. And we recognize that in many instances, the experience they get in school is what allows them to compete. It doesn't necessarily come, we're about 40, 50, we have buildings over 50% free and reduced meal. And our buildings at right about 40%. And we have that as a district, there's a strong sense of mission to kind of close that gap and make sure your family's income doesn't identify your trajectory. So when somebody isn't buying into the vision and isn't playing along and isn't moving things forward, it's like offensive. And it's not just offensive to me. The power of my having those conversations one-on-one or having the difficult conversation, that's nothing compared to your department becoming frustrated with you and occasionally having words with you or making the choice to not willingly collaborate with you or whatever that is. Or, some of the more senior people pulling you aside and saying, this isn't how we do things. My conversation is powerful. Their conversations or their actions are super powerful. And that's just building building culture and community, becomes hard. But listen, those conversations are never easy. But I remember, a professor of mine at SHIP, Jim Ryland, saying it's a moral, ethical decision to address behavior that's not okay.
Moral courage.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
As Jody LoBianco, who is our president of Shape America for our national thing, that's her whole spiel. It's worse to sit by and not do anything about it.
Absolutely.
Brian, you want to start the last segment, and then we'll get these guys wrapped up?
Yeah, I mean, we've talked a lot about a community of caring adults coming together, and I want to end with what's most important, which is students. What do you guys see is the role of a building leader in building culture for students in a school? Chad, why don't you take this one?
I think that again, some of the themes that we've spoken about ring true again here to Matt's earlier point of modeling and being a voice for the voiceless. Are huge responsibilities, and you have to be out in your building. You have to have a good sense of where things stand. You have to have a vision about where you want to go. And then you have to be able to enact upon that so that students are the main focus of your school. If we're not doing that, I'm not sure that why we open the doors in the morning. So I don't know if that answers your question, but I do think that everything you do better start and end with what's best for kids, and that has to some degree become almost cliche, where I've heard people try to frame what's best for them through a lens of what's best for kids.
Right.
And you got to be able to push the hold on, wait a second button, and kind of talk through who's really getting the advantage in that scenario. But it does go back to having a clear vision and a clear painted picture for your staff about what learning should really look like, how we treat kids, how we talk to kids. And back to the question you asked earlier, Brian, it has to do with with having those conversations. When that bar is not reached, somebody needs to step forward and point that out. And they don't have to be mind-bending conversations, but your culture is built on that lowest bar that you're willing to accept. I read a Navy SEALs book once called Extreme Ownership, which is basically the idea you are responsible for every single thing that happens in your building. If something happens in your building, you track back the questions as to who you should have informed, what questions you should have asked that would have led to somebody knowing that wasn't A, okay, or B, what to do differently. And when you think through that lens all the time, when you have something happen and you go, how do I own this and what do I need to do about it? Then I think you're in the right place to lead.
Yeah, Chad, I agree with you, what you said there. It's modeling. It's modeling. I like that bottom rung. That's the floor of what we'll accept. And when someone's not hitting the floor, when they're not meeting the floor, you gotta address it explicitly. I think as you build your team, they'll help you do it. They'll help you. They're essential in helping to protect and sustain a culture. And I hope at some point the kids are part of that too. I hope you build enough trust that because you aren't in every classroom every day, all day. There's lots of classrooms to see, and I'm not either. And I have lots of classrooms to see. But, I have kids who'll come to me when there's something that they think is either not right or certainly not by my standards. I've had kids say, you might want to check this out. And, I can go pop in and check it out or have a conversation with the teacher or, whatever. But it's everybody's on that page. They know what the culture is here. And we have to protect that. And while simultaneously protecting the culture, looking forward to the culture we want to have, right? And we want to look forward to that vision. So that's important too.
So, and I'm sure you both know this from your experience, that you both are one individual person and you can't really do all of this alone. So how does your staff help and really buy into your message and take that culture that you're trying to establish and form it even more so with the students?
I mean, staff are everything. I mean, that again goes back to you understanding that you can't do everything, and how are you building leadership in those people around you, and very, very explicitly sharing that as a goal. I'm going back to my coffee and conversations, the Dunkin' Donuts. One of the things I shared was, I want you to lead my building beside me. I wish I could tear my principal chair in pieces, and you feel the same way about our building that we're putting together as I feel about it. Not just your classroom, not just your silo, but about what's best for our school. And when people have that mentality, a school teacher mentality instead of a classroom teacher mentality, that's powerful stuff, because they're willing to really further the point, to Matt's point earlier, of they help frame what's okay and what's not okay. They help to drive the idea, because now all of a sudden you have people come to you saying, hey, I have an idea. I want to run a faculty meeting that da 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 da. And that first time that happens, you are like, oh my gosh, this is working. It's a really exciting moment when all of a sudden people start to lead beside you, and you start to feel like, wow, if I step to the side, this thing might keep going. And that's pretty powerful.
Well, you're building a system that's going to outlive, anything that you're going to do in your time there. You're building something built on a system, not a person. And I think that's huge. And definitely you're the catalyst and the leader of that, not to take away from anything that you're doing. But I think that's such an important thing to keep in mind as we try to lead in any capacity.
Absolutely.
Yeah, if we don't show up, things still going to happen. Right. I've been in the same building for 10 years as a principal, which was almost unheard of. But listen, next week I could find another gig, or I could whatever. If I didn't show up, things would be fine. And there are people here who would guard the culture, or someone would make fabulous improvements to what's going on. It would work out just fine. Chad, I had the benefit when I came down here. The school had. There were like 3 or 4 staff who knew me from, whether they were students at CV, or there are a couple people who knew of me from other reasons. And, as you're talking about those people who help you with their message, I was giving voice to concerns that a lot of people had and didn't feel empowered to change or to say. And so when we started messaging and started working on school-wide improvement, we were fortunate to have people, even if what we were saying was a little edgy, we were fortunate to have a lot of people, a small group who spread the gospel, who really desperately wanted change. Some didn't know how to give voice to that desire. Some didn't know it was permitted or possible. And some bought in because they knew of, me or others from our team, because they went to our high school, or because they, for whatever reason. And it really helped to spread that, identifying key players to help communicate your message and build momentum with those folks, and knowing that they'll spread the word, that's really helpful in building culture.
And I definitely had a unique experience of, putting the staff together. But to that point, it's also through your hiring process. Like you take every hire with the opportunity to really further your culture. So you're looking for somebody that has some of the same core values or that you connect with, because you're really depending on that as a catalyst to spark a team, to spark an idea. And it's amazing how that playing a chess piece of bringing somebody new on can really be impactful.
Yeah, and remembering that marriage is cheap and divorce is expensive. Right? When we hire, we always say, "Well, we're engaged," and then after year 3, we're married. And divorce gets really expensive. Engagement isn't that expensive. The marriage, we can deal with it, but divorce is really expensive. So we try to make really smart hiring decisions.
Well, I hope your wife is watching tonight, Matt. Well, listen, I got. We're gonna wrap it up because we're running long. But man, I could spend 2 hours with you guys. This is
No, let's keep going. Chad, you doing anything? Let's go.
I got nothing to do. Let's go.
I'm just chilling, right?
I got one more question for each of you, and you can kind of wrap it up however you want to wrap it up, and then I'll close it. But Matt, I know this is going to sound weird and nerdy, but I got to come down and see your school over spring break, and normally I guess when a teacher has spring break, he or she doesn't really go near a school, but I found myself like super excited to get to come to your school and see what you do and see how things go and watch. And one of the things that stood out to me as I walked the hall, and I even verbalized this to you, but I want to share it with our audience tonight, is when I walked the hall with you, every teacher was standing outside of their hallway between classes, talking to kids, waving to kids. And I know you told me the story because I asked you about it there, and I know it's about you and your leadership, but can you kind of discuss how that happened and why it happens?
Yeah, well, one thing is, and it's interesting. I watched Mark Blanchard on the last segment, right, on the last episode, and where Mark and I have different skill. We're very close friends, and we have different skill sets, and we've worked together as administrators and worked well together. And the part of his position as it kind of exists it feels a little bit removed from kids right now, right? And that's really challenging for me. So if I'm walking through the halls, like my school is small enough, I know between a third and a half of the kids' names, about 1,100 kids. And if I don't know their names, I'm pretty good at faking it with, "Hey, brother," right? Hey, brother, like I'm pretty good at it. And they feel invested, and it's not weird for kids to walk up and hug me. And it's not weird in our building for a teacher to tell their kids, like, "We love you." You know that when a kid's melting down or having a bad day, like half the time when a kid's getting suspended, like part of the messaging is this is not an adversarial relationship, right? We love you. I have to do this, but please understand this is not a suggestion that we don't love you. In fact, it's a suggestion we do. And I often make kids say, "Do you know that we love you?" And they do. So there's all of that. That's part of it, and it's treating kids like people and making it a warm, friendly place. Again, we have kids who don't always experience that. And we do it all schools. They don't experience that. The least we can do is make school be the place where they know that they're cared for deeply, right? So as you model that, as you walk down the hallway, as you say hi to kids, or you give a kid a hug or dab him up when he sees you, and they stop to tell you about their basketball game or the concert or whatever, or that they saw you at wherever, the teachers see that and they start to replicate it. And it's so much more fun when you have a friendly relationship with kids. It's so much more fun. It's a much more pleasant place. Listen, we created the expectation that you greet kids when you come in the room. And that we went through a hallway where the people really bought into it, and I don't ever have to send out reminders, and they buy into it. And here's the thing, Todd, they see the rewards that are reaped from that, right?
Yeah.
Those casual exchanges, that's all credit. That's all capital they're putting in the bank. So when they have to get that kid to do a really challenging assignment, that kid buys in, or that kid gets in a verbal or even a physical disagreement with a peer, and that teacher who just said, "Hey, how you doing? What's going on?" gave him a high five, says, "Hey guys, listen," and they stop, right? Because there's such a level of respect. We're a small enough school that there's a really tight sense of community between students and staff and families, that really works. And if you don't use that to your advantage as a teacher, you're not taking advantage of one of the easiest pieces. And that, again, it's explicit. When we hire, we want to make sure people like kids. That's part of it. And that, I think what you saw was evidence of, I like kids. We like kids. That's why we're in this business.
Right. And what stuck out to me too, Matt, was the story you shared with me that, that's not me doing this, meaning you. Like, you told me about the teacher, and I can't remember his name, but I think he taught science, and he had a bald head. He kind of could have been.
Coach Eister. Yeah. Coach Eister, more than anybody, he's the one who mostly told them to get out there. I had said it, and they don't always listen.
Yeah.
At some point, Coach bought into it. He's our basketball coach, fabulous basketball coach. He said it, and they're rule followers, and they were like, yeah, and I think they just bought into it, So he bought into that part of my messaging, and they bought into him, and it worked. Like, that's how that stuff happens. You can get them to buy in. You get one leader, and it starts to flow. It's dominoes falling down.
Yeah. Wow. So, Chad, one of the things when I was kind of formulating this idea of doing this season with administrators and looking at leadership and great leaders, and I needed an elementary principal, and I was honestly struggling for a little while, and I happened to go to a meeting, and there you were, and it just dawned on me as I've worked in this district for 16 years in this district, everywhere I go, and I've been to all of the districts. At one point I had half days, so I got to travel around in the afternoon and visit schools. Every single school I walked in mentioned your name, and I've literally never heard a bad word about you. And people, and I hear teachers talking about following you they want to transfer to your school and they want to work with you. And I've even had some of my own phys ed staff saying, "Hey, can I transfer to work at Chad's school?" And and I don't know if you know that or not, but I certainly do know that there's something related to being intentional about the way you deal with kids. And one of the things that I asked a couple of them, why Chad? Why is he the guy all the time that everybody talks about? And they said, because he's real, and he talks about it being all about the kids, but he's out there and he's living it, and he's in front of it. So can you talk about how you're intentional in doing that? Because there has to be a system to it somehow, with you being intentional with that connection.
Well, I might teared up a little bit there. That was really, really nice. I appreciate that. And certainly has been an amazing experience across each of the schools that I've been in. But I don't know. I guess there's something about that where they're to Matt's point. Do you love being around kids? Like, I honestly, and I'm not being cliche, I do not feel like I come to work every day. There are times in which I'm honestly like, how am I getting paid to do this? Like, and certainly there are hard parts of the job, but when you think about, the fun that you get to have and the interactions that you get to have, it's such a humbling thought to think that you might be a memory in a kid's life that they get to draw upon. That's real stuff. I mean, that's like, I don't know. And I just think you go out there and you go, I come from a place where I did not love school. I honestly did not. School was rough for me. And I think I want to create a different experience for kids. I think of my oldest son and how he feels about school. And this is supposed to be fun. You get to come and learn something. There are other countries that would, bend over backwards for the process that we take for granted every single day. But it is about, wiping a smile on your face and kind of having just straight fun. I've done some pretty wacky stuff. And it's not just all for the play. It's about really, connecting with kids. And that has to do even with, there's the fun stuff like sleeping on the roof and all that good stuff. But it honestly has to do with conversations with kids. Like, I just stopped in a classroom teacher the other day, and I stopped in, and on my way out, she's like, I can't believe you laid down on the floor with the kids to talk, to hang out with them while they were reading. And I was like, well, they were on the floor. Why wouldn't I be on the floor? It didn't occur to me that I would have done anything else. But I think it is one of those things where you go, I love hanging out with kids. And so that's a great compliment from you, Todd, from the standpoint of somebody would say that I'm real, because it does come from a real place. Like it's not contrived. Certainly there are things that I do that are strategic and purposeful. But there are other times where I'm just being me, and connecting with kids is part of who I am. And I think that, some of our best educators at least have that in their toolbox.
Well, Chad, thank you so much for that. And for those of you that don't know Chad, if you ever Google him, I had to get a headshot, and I was trying to Google his images. Just Google image search Chad Runkle. He wears some cool suits at Christmas time.
Don't do that. That's a bad idea.
Middlemans and everything. And Matt, if you want to borrow any, I don't know if you guys are the same size, but
Chad, it looks like you filled out since I last saw you.
A little bit, yeah. My wife
used to look like you were 11 when I remember thinking, man, how's he school? He's Doogie Howser of education, but yeah, maybe I can borrow one. Let's see.
I'm older and rounder than I used to be.
Well, everyone, I'm going to wrap this up tonight, and to close on what Chad talked about with being genuine. These two guests tonight are two of the most genuine individuals I've ever been around in my life, like as educators. And when I thought about doing this, Matt Gay is like your work with those at-risk kids. To this day is something that loops in my head when I have an at-risk kid standing in front of me. And Chad, just knowing what I know about you and working with you throughout the district, and watching staff light up and kids light up even when you're around them and so on, it's just testament to the educators that you are. And like I said, I could have spent another hour on this tonight, as I know Jessica and Brian probably could have as well. So on behalf of Jessica and Brian, and I'd like to thank you guys for being with us tonight. Those of you out there tonight, I didn't send out blog topics this week because it's been a busy week, but I'm guessing you could come up with a few, and I will post those. I will post some blog topics in the discussion. We'll hopefully see you Thursday night on the Twitter chat, 8 p.m. #HackLead. First question goes out at 8 p.m. We're going to base it tonight on the amazing things we learned from these two educators and learners at their school. And we thank them for being with us tonight. And on behalf of Brian and Jessica, thanks so much, everyone.
Thank you.